Bang! The sound of Adam Schiff's fist hitting the mahogany table echoed through the Senate Judiciary Committee room like a gunshot. Paper scattered, a water glass tipped spilling across the polished surface. In the packed gallery, supporters erupted in cheers. "You're nothing but a backwards Louisiana hillbilly in cheap glasses." The words cut through the chamber with surgical precision. Schiff stood at his full height, finger pointing at Senator John Kennedy like a weapon. At 65 years old, the California Democrat's face was flushed, red veins visible at his temples. The fluorescent lights overhead caught the sheen of sweat on his forehead despite the morning coolness of the room. Kennedy sat across from him, calmly pulling a handkerchief from his breast pocket. His wire-rimmed glasses had caught some of the spilled water, and he cleaned them with slow, deliberate movements. Each circular motion was visible to everyone in the room. Methodical, unhurried. The Louisiana Republicans' weathered hands were steady as a surgeon's. The Senate Judiciary Committee hearing on FBI oversight had begun 90 minutes earlier in routine fashion. Kennedy, a senior member, had been questioning FBI officials about potential political bias in investigations. It was dry technical testimony, the kind that usually put reporters to sleep, and cleared galleries by lunch. Then Schiff had erupted. "Louisiana backwater." Schiff's voice rose higher, filling every corner of the marble-columned room. An embarrassment to this Senate. A conspiracy theorist spreading Russian disinformation. Kennedy replaced his glasses on his nose with both hands, taking his time. The small smile playing at the corners of his mouth was almost pitying. He reached for his water glass and took a single sip. His hand didn't shake. "You defended Trump." Schiff pounded the table again. The sharp crack made several people in the gallery jump. "You're too stupid to understand complex intelligence." The Democratic section of the gallery was on its feet now. "Tell him, Adam," someone shouted. Others took up the chant. "Tell him, tell him." The committee room designed for decorum and serious deliberation had transformed into something closer to a political rally. In the front row of the gallery, Maria Gonzalez sat very still. The 52-year-old Louisiana woman wore a black dress, and pinned to her lapel was a photograph of her son in his Marine Corps uniform. Lieutenant Marcus Gonzalez, killed in Afghanistan in 2018. She had driven 6 hours to be here responding to a letter from Senator Kennedy's office. She hadn't expected this. Republicans on the committee shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few exchanged glances. This was beyond normal partisan friction. This was personal, ugly. Democrats, by contrast, seemed energized. Some were filming on their phones, already planning how to clip and share Schiff's tirade. The media section was a frenzy of activity. 40 reporters typed frantically. This was the story, not the dry FBI testimony. But this, a sitting senator calling another senator a backwards hillbilly on national television. C-SPAN cameras captured every moment. Kennedy finished cleaning his glasses. He folded his handkerchief with the same deliberate care and returned it to his pocket. Then he looked up at Schiff with eyes that were remarkably calm. "Senator Schiff." Kennedy's Louisiana drawl was soft, almost gentle. "Are you quite finished?" Schiff's face darkened further. "I haven't even started with you." "You, that's unfortunate." Kennedy interrupted, his politeness somehow more devastating than any shout could be. "Because I have a question for you." The room, which had been roaring with Democratic cheers just moments before, began to quiet. Something in Kennedy's tone, that unshakable calm, was starting to penetrate. Even Schiff seemed to sense it, though he was too far committed to his attack to stop now. Kennedy's weathered hand slid across the table to rest on a thick manila folder. The folder was marked in bold letters. Schiff, Russia investigation. Even from the gallery, the red classified stamps were visible. Schiff's eyes widened slightly. Just a flicker. But Kennedy saw it. So did the cameras. "You told the American people," Kennedy said, his voice still soft, but now carrying to every corner of the room, "for 3 years that you had evidence of Trump-Russia collusion more than circumstantial evidence. You said again and again and again." He paused, letting the words settle like dust after an explosion. "Where is it?" Senator Schiff's mouth opened. His throat worked. "That's classified information I can't discuss." "Can't?" Kennedy interrupted again, still gentle, "or never existed." The silence that followed was oppressive. Even the most enthusiastic Schiff supporters in the gallery seemed uncertain now. The frantic typing in the media section slowed. Chairman Lindsey Graham, who had been reaching for his gavel repeatedly during Schiff's tirade, now sat very still, watching. Schiff scrambled for footing. "This is intimidation. Political intimidation." His voice was loud, but had lost some of its earlier confidence. "I was the lead impeachment manager. I did my constitutional duty." Kennedy said nothing. He simply opened the folder and began organizing papers in front of him. Each document made a soft sound as it was placed on the table. The small sounds were somehow louder than Schiff's shouting had been. Trump was guilty. Schiff insisted, looking around for support. Russia helped him. "The evidence. Let's discuss evidence," Kennedy said quietly. More cheering from Democrats, but it was weaker now. Uncertain. A few people in the gallery were checking their phones, seeing texts from friends watching on C-SPAN. What's Kennedy about to do? Kennedy was writing something in neat script on a legal pad. He didn't look up at Schiff. The small smile never left his face. He let the silence stretch out for a count of 5 before setting down his pen. "Since you've called me stupid, Senator Schiff," Kennedy said, looking up now, "perhaps you'll indulge me. Allow me to educate myself and this committee and the American people watching." He pulled out a thick bound report. The blue cover was instantly recognizable to anyone who had followed the Russia investigation. The Durham report, all 478 pages of it. "Let's discuss what Special Counsel John Durham found about your investigation." Kennedy opened to a marked page and held it up so the cameras could see. The highlighted section was clearly visible. No predicate for investigation. The color drained from Schiff's face. It was visible even through his television makeup. A gray-white polar that the overhead lights made harsh and unforgiving. "Shall we begin?" Kennedy said, his voice like honey over steel. "With your lies to the American people." In the gallery, Maria Gonzalez leaned forward, gripping the bench in front of her. In the back row, a Democratic staffer quietly stood up, gathered his papers, and left through the rear exit. Nobody noticed yet, but it was the first defection. The false confidence that had filled the room when Schiff began his attack was collapsing like air from a punctured tire. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. The afternoon was going to be very long. And Adam Schiff, who had called John Kennedy a backwards hillbilly, was about to learn that sometimes the quiet ones are the most dangerous. The projector came to life with a low hum. The lights in the committee room dimmed automatically and the large screen behind Kennedy lit up with stark white text. Against a blood-red background, Schiff claimed more than circumstantial evidence. Durham report no evidence existed. The gasps were audible throughout the gallery. Even some Democrats looked shocked either at the directness of the presentation or because they were seeing the contradiction laid out so baldly for the first time. Kennedy stood and moved to the side of the screen, laser pointer in hand. The red dot appeared on the projected timeline like a gun sight. March 20, 2017. Kennedy began his Louisiana draw, taking on the methodical tone of a prosecutor. NBC's Meet the Press. "Senator Schiff, you told Chuck Todd, and I quote, 'I have seen more than circumstantial evidence of collusion.'" The screen changed to show a clip of Schiff on the news program. The younger Schiff, hair perfectly coiffed, looked directly into the camera with absolute certainty. "There is evidence of collusion," his recorded voice said, "and I've seen it." Kennedy's laser pointer moved to the next date on the timeline. May 2017. CNN with Jake Tapper. Another clip played. "The case is being built," Schiff said on screen. "The evidence is damning." July 2017. MSNBC. This clip showed Schiff reading from a document. "The Steele dossier." Kennedy narrated. "You read portions of it into the congressional record, giving it the weight of official testimony." "Point of order." Schiff jumped to his feet, nearly knocking over his chair. "Point of order. Senator Schiff." Chairman Graham's voice cut through. "You'll get your turn. Let Senator Kennedy present his evidence as you presented yours." There was an edge to Graham's voice that made it clear this wasn't a request. Schiff remained standing, gripping the table edge. His knuckles had gone white. He opened his mouth to protest again, then seemed to think better of it. He sat down heavily, jaw clenched. Kennedy continued as if there had been no interruption. October 2017. ABC's This Week. "You said, quote, 'There is clear evidence of collusion.'" November 2017. CBS Face the Nation. "The evidence is more than sufficient." January 2018. CNN again. "Those are out of context." Schiff burst out, unable to contain himself. Kennedy stopped. He turned from the screen to look directly at Schiff. Out of context, he repeated slowly, "All of them? Yes. You're cherry-picking. I was all 37 television appearances." Kennedy asked. All out of context. The number hung in the air. 37. The screen changed to show a rapid-fire montage shift on CNN. MSNBC. ABC. CBS. NBC. PBS. The same phrases repeated like a damning mantra. "I've seen the evidence. More than circumstantial. The case is clear. Collusion occurred." The montage played for exactly 60 seconds. 37 appearances condensed into one devastating minute. When it finished, the silence in the committee room was absolute. Then the screen changed again. Mueller report March 2019 did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government. Another screen change. IG Horowitz report December 2019. 17 significant errors and omissions in FISA applications. No evidence to support probable cause. And finally, Durham report May 2023. FBI had no predicated evidence. Investigation should not have been opened. The entire premise was false. Democrats in the gallery were no longer cheering. Many were looking at their phones, reading texts, checking Twitter. 2 more stood up and quietly exited. The defections were beginning. Kennedy returned to his seat and picked up the physical Durham report. He opened it to a marked section and began reading aloud. Quote, "Neither U.S. law enforcement nor the intelligence community appears to have possessed any actual evidence of collusion in their holdings at the commencement of the Crossfire Hurricane investigation." He looked up at Schiff. "Senator, as chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, you had access to the same classified information that Robert Mueller had. The same information that John Durham reviewed. You saw what they saw." Kennedy's voice hardened slightly. "Not much, but enough to notice. Yet for 3 years, you went on national television 37 times and told the American people that you had seen evidence. Evidence that, as these 3 independent investigations have now conclusively shown, never existed. I had a different interpretation." Schiff's voice was defensive, now higher-pitched. "The intelligence was ambiguous. My interpretation." Kennedy interrupted. "The evidence wasn't ambiguous. Senator, it wasn't there. You weren't interpreting evidence. You were fabricating it. That's a lie." Kennedy pulled out another document. This one had the seal of the United States House of Representatives on it. HRE June 21, 2023. The House of Representatives voted to censure you, Senator Schiff. The word censure seemed to echo in the gallery. Maria Gonzalez whispered to no one in particular. "They censured him." Kennedy read from the resolution. Representative Adam Schiff misled the American people. Abused sensitive information to which he had access. Engaged in conduct unbecoming of an elected member of the House of Representatives. He looked up. The vote was 213 to 209. Every Republican voted yes. And before you claim this was purely partisan. Kennedy pulled out printouts. These are anonymous quotes from your Democratic colleagues leaked to reporters after the vote. He read them one by one. "He made us look like fools. We trusted him with our careers and he lied to us. His grandstanding damaged the party's credibility." Schiff's face had gone from red to white to gray. He looked like a man watching his life collapse in real time. "That was political retribution," he managed weakly. "After I impeached Trump, retribution from your own party?" Kennedy asked. "Senator, you've been officially censured by the House of Representatives. Only the 25th member in American history to receive that condemnation. You claim it's political. Fine, let's examine the politics." Kennedy held up the Warren Steele dossier. This document compiled by Christopher Steele, former British intelligence, paid for. And we know this now conclusively by the Hillary Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee. Paid for by your party. He opened it to marked pages. Page 17. Trump campaign coordinated with Russia. Durham's conclusion. False. Never happened. Page 23. Michael Cohen met with Russian agents in Prague. Mueller verified that Cohen was provably in Los Angeles that day. Never went to Prague. Page 36. Compromising videos exist. No evidence ever anywhere. Kennedy pulled out yet another document. This one looked like a transcript. December 2017. Classified House Intelligence Committee interview. You personally questioned Igor Danchenko. Christopher Steele's primary source for the dossier. He looked directly at Schiff. Mr. Danchenko told you under oath that some of his information might have been Bartok and hearsay. Those were his exact words. Bartok. And you went on television and presented this as actionable intelligence to the American people. Those interviews were classified. Schiff protested. You can't. They were declassified last year. Kennedy said calmly. The American people have a right to know what you knew and when you knew it. For the first time, Kennedy's voice rose slightly with genuine emotion. You had the truth in December 2017. You knew the Steele dossier was based on gossip and hearsay. You knew the sources were questionable. And you went on CNN in January 2018 and said the evidence was more than sufficient. He set down the transcript and picked up a photograph. He held it up for the cameras. It showed a simple building exterior. This is One United Bank headquarters in Boston. But we'll get to that later. First, let's talk about what happened in the 2 years after you started making these claims. The screen behind Kennedy changed to show a map of the United States. Red dots began appearing across it, each one labeled with a location and a date. Families divided, Kennedy said softly. Friendships destroyed. Death threats sent. Violence in the streets. All based on the premise that the President of the United States was a Russian agent. A premise that you, Senator Schiff, as the ranking member and then chairman of the House Intelligence Committee with access to the most classified information in our government, knew was false. In the gallery, Maria Gonzalez felt tears on her face. Her son had died in 2018. And she remembered the bitter arguments in their family. Her brother-in-law insisting that Marcus was dying for a traitor president. That Trump had betrayed the country to Russia. The family had fractured. They hadn't spoken at the funeral. All based on a lie. More Democrats were leaving now. The exits were no longer quiet and subtle. People were getting up, gathering their things, and walking out. The gallery, which had been at full capacity when Schiff began his attack, was maybe 70% full now. Kennedy wasn't done. But spreading false information isn't your only problem, Senator. That's a political crime. Perhaps. An ethical failure. Certainly. But what you did next? He reached for a red folder, the color indicating classified information. What you did next was a federal crime. He opened the folder and pulled out a form with the FBI seal at the top. This is an FBI Form 302. It's a witness interview report. This particular 302 documents an interview with a Democratic staffer who worked on the House Intelligence Committee for 10 years. 10 years, Senator. A Democrat on your committee. Schiff's hands were shaking now. Visibly shaking as they rested on the table in front of him. This whistleblower told the FBI that in 2017, you personally authorized the leak of classified information to media outlets. Kennedy's voice was quiet, but it carried. He said, you told your staff that the leaked information would be used to indict President Trump. The committee room exploded. Reporters shouted questions. Democrats jumped to their feet protesting. Chairman Graham's gavel came down again and again. Bang, bang, bang. But the chaos continued. Through it all, Kennedy sat calmly, his hands folded on the table in front of him. He waited. Eventually, the room quieted enough for him to continue. The whistleblower, Kennedy said, called your conduct treasonous. The FBI interviewed him 3 times in 2017 and 2020 and again in 2023. His testimony remained consistent. He provided corroborating evidence. He named other witnesses. The FBI found him credible. Lies. Schiff's voice cracked. He's a disgruntled former employee. This is Senator. Kennedy interrupted. We'll take a 15-minute recess. When we return, we'll discuss the systematic leak operation in detail. And then, he pulled out another thick folder. This one marked mortgage fraud. Federal investigation. Then we'll discuss how you defrauded the American taxpayer by falsely claiming 2 separate residences as your primary home to secure better mortgage rates. The silence that followed was absolute. Schiff sat frozen, staring at the mortgage fraud folder like a man looking at his own execution warrant. 15 minutes, Chairman Graham said, his gavel coming down one final time. As the committee recessed, Kennedy gathered his papers methodically. He didn't look at Schiff. He didn't need to. The damage was done, and everyone in the room knew it. The afternoon was only half over, and Adam Schiff's career was already in ruins. But Kennedy wasn't finished, not even close. The 15-minute recess felt like 15 hours. In the hallways outside the committee room, reporters ambushed anyone willing to talk. Democrats fled to their offices, refusing comment. Republicans, for once, said nothing. They were letting Kennedy's evidence speak for itself. In a small office down the hall, Adam Schiff sat with his chief of staff, his face buried in his hands. His phone was exploding with messages. Nancy Pelosi, call me Chuck Schumer. We need to talk. His campaign manager, what the hell is happening? He couldn't answer any of them. He could barely breathe. When the committee reconvened, the gallery was noticeably emptier. Maybe 60% capacity now. Those who remained leaned forward in their seats, anticipating what was coming next. Kennedy waited until everyone was settled before he began. No dramatics, no preamble. He simply opened the red folder and pulled out a document with the FBI seal. August 12, 2025. Kennedy said FBI Director Kash Patel declassified portions of an investigation into classified leaks from the House Intelligence Committee. I'm going to read directly from the FBI's findings. He put on his reading glasses. A Democratic whistleblower who worked on the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence for over 10 years reported that in January 2017, then Representative Adam Schiff authorized the systematic leaking of classified information to media outlets. Schiff jumped to his feet. This is hearsay. Discredited by whom? Kennedy looked up calmly. The FBI interviewed this individual 3 times over 6 years. They found his testimony consistent and credible. They corroborated his account with other witnesses. The Department of Justice reviewed the case and declined to prosecute you only because of congressional speech and debate immunity, which protects you from criminal charges but doesn't change the facts of what you did. Kennedy returned to reading. The whistleblower reported attending a January 2017 OMU's meeting where Representative Schiff stated that the group would leak classified information derogatory to President Donald Trump. Schiff stated the information would be used to indict the president. He paused, letting that sink in. Used to indict not because the information was accurate, not because the public had a right to know, but specifically to engineer an indictment of a sitting president. The whistleblower objected, stating this would be illegal. Kennedy continued. According to the FBI report, other staff members present at the meeting reassured him that they would not be caught leaking classified information. The screen behind Kennedy lit up with a flowchart. At the top, Schiff approves leak. Below that, a series of boxes connected by arrows showing a systematic process. The FBI investigation uncovered what they termed a systematic leak operation. Kennedy explained. Intelligence Committee staffers would gather classified information from briefings. They would type summaries on a standalone computer, one not connected to any network, kept in a back room of the committee offices. These summaries would be run up to you, Senator Schiff, for approval. The flowchart showed the progression. Gather intel, type summary, shift approval, select recipient, leak via cutouts. Once you approved a leak, Kennedy continued, your staff would use what they called cutouts intermediaries who couldn't be directly traced back to the committee. They would coincidentally encounter reporters at restaurants, airports, social events. Information would be shared as off the record or deep background. He clicked to the next slide, which showed a list of media outlets. CNN, MSNBC, The Washington Post, The New York Times, all received classified leaks from your operation. And then you, Senator, would appear on these same networks and say you couldn't comment on classified information, all while knowing your staff had already leaked it. This is conspiracy theory. Schiff's voice was hoarse now, strained from shouting. You have no proof. I have FBI witness statements. Kennedy said quietly. I have phone records. I have travel logs showing your staff in the same cities as reporters on the same days stories broke. I have text messages obtained through subpoena. He pulled out a thick stack of papers. The whistleblower named names, specific staffers, specific reporters, specific leaks. The FBI corroborated his account. They found the standalone computer. They interviewed the network administrator who set it up. They traced the leaks. A man stood up in the gallery. He was in his early 30s, wearing a suit that looked slightly too big on him. His hands were shaking as he held a piece of paper. I have something to say, the man announced. Security officers started moving toward him, but Kennedy held up a hand. Let him speak. Chairman Graham looked uncertain, but nodded. State your name. David Chen. I worked for Representative Schiff as an intelligence staffer from 2016 to 2018. I was fired. Schiff's face went white. Get him out. He's lying. He let him finish, Graham said firmly. Chen's voice was shaking but determined. I worked with the Democratic staffer who went to the FBI before he was fired. He told me about the leak system. He showed me the computer in the back room. He said he was being forced out because he refused to participate because he had insufficient party loyalty. Those were the exact words. He looked directly at Schiff. I was young. I needed the job. I stayed quiet. But I saw it. I knew what was happening. And when the FBI contacted me in 2020, I told them everything. I confirmed what he said. All of it. The room was utterly silent. This wasn't FBI reports or documents that could be disputed. This was a human being standing in front of cameras corroborating the whistleblower's account. Thank you, Mr. Chen, Kennedy said quietly. Chen sat down and Kennedy returned to his presentation. Senator Schiff, the penalties for unauthorized disclosure of classified information are severe. Under 18 U.S.C. Sever 793, each count carries up to 10 years in federal prison and a fine of up to $250. The FBI has identified multiple separate leaks. Multiple counts. He let that math sink in. Multiple counts. Multiple decades of potential prison time. But the Department of Justice declined to prosecute you because of congressional immunity. That immunity protects you from criminal charges. It doesn't protect you from this committee. It doesn't protect you from the American people knowing the truth. Kennedy organized his papers, stacking them neatly. You leaked classified information for political gain. You did it systematically. You did it knowingly. And when one of your own staffers objected on grounds of conscience, you forced him out. He looked up at Schiff. That's not patriotism, Senator. That's not defending the Constitution. That's corruption. Schiff had collapsed back into his chair. His face was buried in his hands. The man who had begun this hearing standing and shouting was now hunched over. Defeated. The transformation was stark. But leaking classified information, Kennedy said, his voice taking on a different tone. Something more personal isn't your only crime. You also defrauded the American people in a much more direct way. You stole from them. He pulled out the mortgage fraud folder. The movement was almost casual. But everyone in the room understood its significance. This was different from the Russia investigation or even the classified leaks. This was personal theft from taxpayers. The screen behind Kennedy changed to show two photographs side by side. On the left, a substantial brick home with a pool clearly expensive. On the right, a modest condo building in California, Maryland, Kennedy said, pointing to the first photo. 3.420 feet, 4 bedrooms. Pool. Current value $1.40 $4 million and California pointing to the second 650 feet 1 bedroom current value $450 text appeared below the photos both claimed as primary residence 2009-2020 ETS fraud Senator Schiff Kennedy said simply let's discuss how you stole from America the afternoon was far from over Kennedy pulled out a document with Fannie Mae letterhead. In 2003, you purchased the Maryland home for $870. You obtained a Fannie Mae-backed mortgage for $610 at an interest rate of 5.625%. On your mortgage application, you signed an affidavit declaring this property as your primary and principal residence. He held up the affidavit. Schiff's signature was clearly visible on the projected image. 6 years later in 2009, you purchased a condominium in Burbank, California in your congressional district. You financed this property as well. And on this application, Kennedy held up another document. You also declared it as your primary residence. This declaration allowed you to receive a California homeowner's tax exemption, saving you approximately $7 per year. The math was simple. The fraud was clear. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Now, Senator, I'm not a fancy lawyer like you. I'm just a country lawyer from Louisiana. But even I know that you can't have two primary residences. Federal law is very clear on this point. Kennedy pulled out the mortgage guidelines. Primary residence means your true fixed and permanent home. The place where you intend to live for the majority of the year. Not a place you visit. Not a second home. Your primary home. One, not two. I do live in both. Schiff protested weakly. Congress requires us to maintain residences in both Washington and our home districts. Everyone does this. Everyone has two homes. Kennedy agreed. Primary and secondary. The interest rates are different. The tax treatment is different. Because claiming a property as primary when it isn't is fraud. Senator. It's stealing better terms from the bank. It's stealing tax benefits from the state. It's stealing from honest people who tell the truth on their applications. Kennedy's voice thickened with emotion. He removed his glasses and pulled out his handkerchief again. For a moment, he seemed to struggle with his composure. My mother, he said quietly, lost her home in 2008. 4. The bank had given her a loan she couldn't really afford. But when the crisis hit and she needed help, a modification, a temporary forbearance, they said no. He paused, wiping his eyes. The room was completely silent. She worked 3 jobs trying to save that house. 3 jobs at 67 years old. She lost it anyway. And you know what, Senator? She had one home. She told the truth on every form she ever signed. She played by the rules. Kennedy looked up at Schiff. While my mother was working 3 jobs and losing her home, you were refinancing your Maryland mansion, which you also claimed as your primary residence, getting better rates because you were willing to lie. The human moment was devastating. Even some Republicans were visibly moved. Democrats who had been defending Schiff couldn't meet Kennedy's eyes. Kennedy composed himself and continued. Between 2009 and 2020, 11 years, you refinanced the Maryland property 4 times. In 2009, 2011, 2012, and 2013, each time you signed an affidavit declaring it as your primary residence. Each time that was false. Each time you got better terms than you would have gotten if you'd told the truth. He pulled out a letter. This is from William P. Y., Director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency. It's addressed to Attorney General Pam Bondi and dated May 2025. 3 months ago, Kennedy read from the letter. Mr. Adam B. Schiff has in multiple instances falsified bank documents and property records to acquire more favorable loan terms impacting payments from 2003 to 2019 for a PTOIC Maryland-based property. Director P.Y. concludes that your conduct potentially violated multiple federal criminal statutes. Wire fraud, mail fraud, bank fraud, and making false statements to financial institutions under 18 U.S.C. Secret 14. Schiff tried to respond. This is political. PT is a Trump appointee. You voted to confirm him. Kennedy interrupted. The Senate confirmed Director P.E. by a bipartisan vote. You were one of the yes votes. Senator. Kennedy pulled out more documents. Here's your 2023 campaign statement. My primary residence is Burbank, California. But here's your 2011 mortgage refinancing affidavit. My primary residence is PTOAC, Maryland. Same properties. Opposite claims. Both sworn statements. He looked at Schiff. Which oath did you lie under, Senator? Schiff had no answer. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Let's talk about the money, Kennedy said, pulling out a calculator. An actual physical calculator, which he held up for the cameras. Primary residence interest rates are typically 0.5 to 1% lower than secondary residence rates. Over 16 years with the amounts you borrowed, you saved between $30 and $50 through fraud. He clicked the calculator. Add in the California tax exemption. $7 per year for 11 years. That's $77. Total ill-gotten gains over $100. You stole more than $100 from American taxpayers. A woman stood in the gallery. She was crying. My name is Jennifer Martinez. She said, I'm a teacher. In 2012, I applied for a mortgage. I was denied. She held up a letter. Same bank. Same year he refinanced. I made $45 a year. I was a single mother. I told the truth on my application. I was denied. Her voice broke. He made a $174 as a congressman. He had book deals. He was a millionaire. He got approved by lying. I got denied by telling the truth. Where's the justice in that? She sat down sobbing. The gallery was silent except for her tears. Kennedy let the moment breathe. Then he said quietly, that's the real crime, Senator Schiff, not the money you stole. Though that's bad enough. It's the honest people you stole from. The system you corrupted. The trust you betrayed. Schiff's head was down on the table now. He looked like he wanted to disappear. Senator Schiff, Kennedy said, you mentioned Ken Paxton earlier. The Texas Attorney General, who also had multiple properties claimed as primary residences. You asked where our outrage was about that. Schiff looked up, grasping at the lifeline. Yes, he had 3 properties. Why aren't you? He's under investigation. 2. Kennedy said calmly. By Texas authorities. And if the evidence warrants, he should be prosecuted. 2 wrongs don't make a right, Senator. Kennedy paused. But I noticed something. Your defense isn't I didn't do it. Your defense is other people do it. 2. That's not a defense, Senator. That's a confession. The truth of that statement seemed to hit Schiff physically. He slumped further in his chair. His lawyer sitting in the gallery had his head in his hands. One more thing about disclosure, Kennedy said. You bought the Maryland home in 2003. Federal law requires you to disclose all liabilities over $10 on your annual financial disclosure forms. You didn't disclose the Maryland mortgage until 2011. 8 years late, you bought the California condo in 2009. You didn't disclose that mortgage until 2011 either. 2 years late, you were already fined $5 in 2012 for late disclosure. Which means you knew disclosure was required. You just chose not to comply. Kennedy organized his papers. So, we have lying about Russia for 3 years. Systematically leaking classified information. Committing mortgage fraud across 2 decades. Failing to properly disclose your finances. He pulled out the thickest folder yet. It was 4 in tall. But this, Kennedy said, shows the complete pattern of your career. Your entire tenure in Congress has been marked by corruption, lies, and putting yourself above the law. He opened the folder to show tabs marking different sections. Censure, ethics violations, media deception, campaign finance, investigations. Let's discuss your legacy. Senator Schiff. 4 screens around the committee room lit up simultaneously. They surrounded Schiff, leaving him nowhere to look without seeing his failures documented. Screen 1. Censured by House. June 2023. Screen 2. Blocked from Intelligence Committee. 2023. Screen 3. Ethics investigation ongoing. Screen 4. DOJ. Criminal investigation. 2025. Schiff turned his head from one screen to another. Trapped in a 360-degree display of his misconduct. Kennedy remained standing at the podium. Hours DA Fund. The House of Representatives censured you on June 21, 2023. Let me read the key findings. He read slowly, giving each phrase its full weight. Representative Adam Schiff misled the American people regarding allegations of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. Representative Schiff abused his position of extreme trust as chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. Representative Schiff's conduct brought disrepute upon the House of Representatives. You became only the 25th member of the House to be censured in American history. At the time you called it a badge of honor. You said it was political theater. Kennedy looked up. Still proud, Senator. Still think it's theater. The vote breakdown appeared on screen 213,209. Every single Republican voted to censure you. 4 Democrats joined them. But more importantly, Kennedy pulled out newspaper articles. After the vote, multiple Democratic colleagues anonymously told reporters what they really thought. He read the quotes. He made us look like fools by going on TV with claims he couldn't back up. We trusted him with our credibility. And he abused that trust. His grandstanding damaged the party's ability to conduct serious oversight. These weren't Republican, Senator. These were your own colleagues. Your own party. The people who should have been your allies. Kennedy sat down the articles. The Durham report proved you lied about Russia. The FBI whistleblower proved you leaked classified information. The FHFA criminal referral proved you committed mortgage fraud. But you still want us to believe the censure was just political theater. Before Schiff could respond, an elderly black man in the gallery stood up. He was leaning on a hand-carved cane. And his suit jacket bore pins from the Selma March and the Voting Rights Act. Scars were visible on his arms. Old scars from police dogs. I have something to say, the man announced. His voice was strong despite his age. Security moved toward him, but Kennedy raised a hand. Please, sir. The committee would like to hear from you. Chairman Graham nodded. State your name. James Wright. I marched with Congressman John Lewis in Selma. March 7, 1965. Bloody Sunday. State troopers beat me with clubs. Police dogs bit me. He showed the scars. I spent 12 days in the hospital and 6 months in jail. Also, people like you. He pointed at Schiff with his cane. Could have opportunities my generation never had. The room was absolutely silent. Every eye was on Wright. You dishonored everything we fought for. Wright continued, his voice stronger now. You weaponized the FBI. The same FBI that spied on Dr. Kane. That tried to blackmail him. That drove good men to their deaths. We fought to reform that agency. And you corrupted it for political gain. Tears were streaming down his face now. You lied to the American people while wrapping yourself in the flag of justice. You stole from taxpayers while claiming to fight for the little guy. You used our civil rights legacy as a shield while you committed crimes. He tapped his cane on the floor. The sound echoed like a judge's gavel. Shame on you, Senator Schiff. Shame on you. Wright turned and walked slowly toward the exit. Each tap of his cane echoed in the silent room. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of judgment. Even the Republicans looked moved. Some Democrats were openly crying. Schiff had a single tear running down his face. The first tears anyone had seen from him all day. When Wright exited and the door closed behind him, Kennedy waited a long moment before continuing. Wright's testimony deserved that silence. Finally, Kennedy returned to his presentation. The media, he said simply. A new screen appeared with statistics. CNN gave you 51 appearances during the Mueller investigation. MSNBC 47. ABC, CBS, and NBC combined 38. Total 136 appearances across 3 years where you claim to have evidence of collusion. Video clips played. Jake Tapper asking softball questions. Rachel Maddow treating Schiff like a hero. No one challenging his claims. No one asking to see the evidence. They just believed him. They made you a star based on lies. Kennedy said. And when the Durham report came out, proving you'd lied, when you were censured, when the whistleblower testimony emerged, they barely covered it. Page 6. Stories. Buried below the fold because they were complicit in your deception. They built their ratings on your lies. And they couldn't admit they'd been played. Kennedy's voice took on an edge. A free press is essential to democracy. But when the press becomes an accessory to political lies, they betray their calling just as surely as you betrayed your oath. He sat down the media statistics and picked up another document. Senator Schiff, I want to be clear about what's happening right now as we speak. There are 2 grand juries impaneled and active. One in Maryland for mortgage fraud. One in Virginia for potential classified leak charges that might not be covered by immunity. Schiff's face went gray. Special Attorney Ed Martin has been appointed by Attorney General Bondi to oversee both investigations. He met with FHFA Director PY 3 days ago. Witnesses are being subpoenaed. Your bank records have been obtained. Phone records, travel records. Former staffers are being interviewed. Kennedy looked directly at Schiff. This isn't speculation. This is prosecution. The only question is how many counts. The timeline appeared on screen. Criminal referrals. May 2025. Grand juries impaneled August 2025. Testimony collection September 2025. Expected indictments October-November 2025. Justice delayed is not justice denied. Kennedy said quietly. It's coming, Senator. Kennedy's voice softened one final time. He removed his glasses and wiped his eyes again. You asked me earlier why this is personal. I told you about my mother. But there's more. He pulled out a photograph and held it up. Maria Gonzalez in the front row gasped when she saw it. It was her son. This is Marine Lieutenant Marcos Gonzalez, killed in Afghanistan October 2018. Intelligence breach compromised his unit's position. Taliban ambush. Marcus and 4 other Marines died. Kennedy's voice was thick with emotion. Investigators traced the leak back to the House Intelligence Committee. The time frame matched your systematic leak operation. We don't know for certain if it was your leak that killed Marcus. But the possibility is there. He looked at Maria Gonzalez. She was openly sobbing. His mother wrote to me 3 times asking for someone to investigate. She wanted to know why her son died. She wanted accountability. Kennedy looked at Schiff. That's why I'm here, Senator. Not for politics. Not for revenge. For Maria Gonzalez and her son Marcus. For every American you betrayed while claiming to protect them. The room was destroyed. Republicans and Democrats, media and staff, everyone was either crying or close to it. Even Schiff was weeping openly. Now his face in his hands. Kennedy organized his papers one final time. I'm done, Mr. Chairman. He buttoned his jacket and stood. Schiff's head shot up. Wait, Schiff's voice was desperate, broken. Kennedy, wait, I can explain. Kennedy walked toward the door. He didn't look back. At the exit, he paused and spoke without turning around. Explain it to the grand jury. Senator. Explain it to Maria Gonzalez. Explain it to Marcus. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Schiff sat alone at the witness table. The gallery was mostly empty now. Maybe 30 people left out of the 150 who had packed it when the day began. The cameras were still rolling, documenting every moment of his complete destruction. Chairman Graham's gavel came down. This hearing is adjourned. But for Adam Schiff, the real judgment was only beginning. The committee room emptied like a theater after a tragedy. Democrats fled without speaking to reporters. Republicans left quietly, offering no triumphant statements. Even the media seemed subdued, as if they'd witnessed something beyond normal political warfare. Something more like a public execution. Schiff sat at the witness table unable to move. His legs wouldn't work. A combination of physical exhaustion and emotional shock had rendered him literally unable to stand. Senator, his aide whispered urgently, crouching beside him, we need to go. The next committee needs the room. I can't, Schiff said simply. I can't stand up. The aide signaled to security. 2 officers helped Schiff to his feet, supporting his weight as they guided him toward the exit. The few remaining photographers captured every moment the defeated walk. The officers holding him up the face of a broken man. His phone still on the table showed 147 missed calls. Text messages were cascading across the screen faster than the phone could display them. But they all said the same thing. No comment. Can't help. Sorry. Outside in the hallway, reporters formed a gauntlet. Questions came like machine gun fire. Senator, will you resign? Did you commit mortgage fraud? Why did you lie about Russia? Will you plead guilty? Schiff's mouth opened, but no words came out. His aide, running interference, repeated the same phrase. No questions. Senator has no comment. Outside the Capitol building, protesters had gathered. The crowd was strange. Democrats and Republicans standing together, united in their anger. Signs read, Liar Schiff. Resign now. Justice for truth. We trusted you. An elderly woman broke through the security line, screaming, I voted for you 6 times. You betrayed us. Schiff couldn't face them. He kept his head down as security formed a protective shield around him. His congressional car wasn't there. The driver had called ahead. Vehicle unavailable. Sir. Even the drivers were abandoning him. Schiff had to call an Uber. A sitting United States senator calling an Uber to escape the Capitol. The wait was 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Standing on the curb while protesters surrounded him. Cameras capturing everything. When the car finally arrived, the driver recognized him immediately. Hey, aren't you that senator in trouble? Schiff said nothing. He stared out the window as rain began to fall. The windshield wipers moved rhythmically. Every bar, every restaurant they passed had news on the screens. His face was everywhere. He couldn't escape it. The radio was on. News coverage of his hearing. He heard his own voice from that morning. You're nothing but a backwards Louisiana hillbilly. Then Kennedy's calm response. The contrast was devastating. The driver kept glancing at him in the rearview mirror, but eventually gave up trying to make conversation. Meanwhile, in his office, John Kennedy sat alone. His jacket was off, his tie loosened. The exhaustion was visible on his face. 9 hours of hearing all that preparation. The emotional toll of confronting a colleague. His phone was ringing. Media requests. He didn't answer. This wasn't about publicity. On his desk were Maria Gonzalez's 3 letters. Next to them, a photograph of his mother. He looked at both for a long time. Had he done the right thing? Had Marcus Gonzalez been honored by what happened today? Or had this just been political revenge dressed up as accountability? He opened his desk drawer and pulled out another photograph, Marcus in his Marine uniform. Maria had given it to him after the hearing, pressing it into his hands with tears streaming down her face. Thank you, she'd whispered. Thank you for saying his name. Kennedy made one phone call to Maria. Mrs. Gonzalez. It's Senator Kennedy. She was crying on the other end of the line. Happy tears. Sad tears. Everything mixed together. Your son was honored today. Kennedy said quietly. His service. His sacrifice. It mattered. And someone is being held accountable. They talked for 10 minutes. When Kennedy hung up, he felt not satisfaction, not joy, just the quiet sense of duty fulfilled. Then he opened another drawer. More files. Other cases. Other corruption to investigate. The work was never done. This was one battle in a much longer war. 1 week later, the consequences for Adam Schiff were still unfolding. He was at his California home, having not left the house in 3 days. Protesters had finally dispersed, but the damage was permanent. Professional destruction had been swift. The Senate Democratic Caucus put his committee assignments under review, which everyone knew meant he was being stripped of positions. 3 staffers resigned. 4 others had updated their LinkedIn profiles and were clearly looking for new jobs. One gave an interview to CNN, carefully distancing himself from Schiff's actions. Campaign donors were demanding refunds. Email lists were hemorrhaging unsubscribes. Speaking engagements had been canceled. His book publisher was reconsidering the contract, which meant it would be canceled within a week. But the professional consequences devastating as they were palled compared to the legal reality. His lawyers met with him daily. They discussed options: resign before indictment, fight the charges, try to negotiate a plea deal. Every option was bad. The evidence was overwhelming. Grand juries in Maryland and Virginia were meeting regularly. Subpoenas were being issued. His bank records, phone records, travel records, everything was being examined. Former staffers were being interviewed one by one. The walls were closing in. Personally, the toll was perhaps worst of all. His wife was supportive, but the strain was visible. They were sleeping in separate rooms now. His children called less frequently. Friends from law school didn't return his calls, except one who called every few days just to check in. He'd lost 12 pounds in a week. Couldn't sleep. When he did sleep, he had nightmares about prison. His doctor prescribed medication for anxiety. He sat alone in his home office, TV on mute, showing his own hearing on repeat. He couldn't stop watching it. The confident man who'd called Kennedy a backwards hillbilly that morning seemed like a stranger now. His laptop was open to news articles about himself. The headlines were brutal. Once rising star faces multiple federal investigations. How did we miss this? Media outlets reckon with Schiff coverage. California Democrats distance themselves from embattled senator. Grand jury's active Schiff indictment expected within weeks. His phone, which had been exploding with messages that first day, was now mostly silent. The people who mattered had already said what they needed to say. Governor Newsom, who used to golf with him, no comment. Nancy Pelosi, who'd once trusted him to lead impeachment. Adam needs to think about what's best for the party. Translation: resign. At 65 years old, senator for barely 18 months. His career was over. His legacy would be corruption, not the Trump impeachment he'd hoped to be remembered for. His freedom was uncertain. Federal prosecutors were building cases that could send him to prison for decades. He sat in the dark, the only light coming from the muted television screen showing his own face. His own defeat on an endless loop. He was waiting for the indictment, waiting for the next blow, waiting for the end. The cost of destroying others he'd learned too late was self-destruction. Outside his window, the street was empty. Even the protesters had moved on to other stories. He'd become yesterday's news, except for the legal proceedings that would drag on for months or years. Adam Schiff had called John Kennedy a backwards hillbilly and cheap glasses. That morning felt like a lifetime ago. Now Schiff understood what Kennedy had known all along. Sometimes the quiet ones, the ones who let their evidence speak, are the most dangerous opponents of all. The reckoning had come and there was no escaping.